I used to think of my home by Willow Lake as the most serene place on earth. I'd wake up to the gentle lapping of water against the shore, set my coffee on the porch, and listen to the birds chirping in the trees around me. It was peaceful, secure, quiet, a hidden paradise far from the clamor of the outside world. I never dreamed that everything would unravel over something as simple as a gate. It began on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the sun feels warm but not oppressive, and the world seems perfectly in balance. I was working from home, finishing a project for my job, when the doorbell chimed. I wasn't expecting anyone. Curious, I peered through the peephole. There stood Margaret Evans, the president of our Pine Hollow Homeowners Association HOA. Her arms were crossed, and her lips curved into a tight smile that didn't touch her eyes. Her silver necklace glinted in the sunlight, almost blindingly so. She looked irritated, as if waiting on my porch was beneath her. I took a steadying breath and opened the door. "Good afternoon, Margaret," I said, offering a polite smile. "What brings you here?" She didn't mince words. "The board held an emergency meeting last night," she snapped. "It's about your new gate. You've blocked the path to the Lockyer path residents have used for decades." I blinked, caught off guard. "That path is on my property. I checked the deed and county records when I bought the house." "That may be," she replied, "but the board voted. You're required to give us a key. Homeowners are upset they don't want to walk an extra 10 minutes to the lake." I stood there, stunned. "Margaret, I put up that gate because people were littering on my land. I found beer cans, trash, even dirty diapers. It wasn't safe or respectful. This isn't a public park, it's my backyard." Her smile thinned into a smirk. "You might think it's yours, but that trail's been used by the community for years. There's such a thing as established use. Just because you're new here doesn't mean you can erase decades of access." I kept my composure. "I consulted my lawyer before installing the gate. There's no easement on my deed, and I've had no trespassing signs up for over 6 months. That stops any claim to public use." Her face flushed. "Our HOA rules require homeowners to maintain the community's appearance and access points. Section 7 clearly states." "Section 7 applies to common property," I interrupted, my voice firm. "This isn't common property. It's private mine." Her tone turned icy. "Let me be clear," she said, stepping closer. "The board can make life hard for those who don't cooperate. Last year, Peter Grayson refused to shorten his fence. He ended up with due law $122,000 in fines and a lien on his house. Is that what you want? Just give us the key, and this doesn't have to escalate." I met her gaze. "We're done here. If the HOA wants to push this, they can talk to my lawyer." I handed her my attorney's card and closed the door with a soft but resolute click. Through the blinds, I watched her stalk off, already dialing her phone. My heart raced, but I felt I'd done the right thing. I called my lawyer, Daniel, immediately. "After I explained everything," he said, "start documenting. If they keep this up, we'll need evidence of harassment." That night, sleep eluded me. My mind replayed her threat and the story of Peter's fines. How many others had been strong-armed into silence? Around 11:30 p.m., my phone buzzed a motion alert from my security camera. I opened the app and froze. 3 figures stood at my gate. One had short, dark hair. Margaret, no doubt. With her were Henry Brooks, the HOA treasurer, and Carl Simmons, their facilities manager. Henry held something metallic bolt cutters. I hit record and called 911. "Someone's trying to break into my property," I said, fighting panic. By the time I threw on clothes and rushed downstairs, the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find Officer Blake. "Good evening," he said. "We got a call about trespassers." I showed him my phone. "They're HOA board members. I caught them trying to cut my lock." He reviewed the footage and nodded. "Let's check it out." We walked to the backyard. They were gone, but the padlock bore deep scratches and footprints marked the soft dirt. "This is attempted breaking and entering," Officer Blake said, starting a report. Headlights flashed as a black SUV pulled up. Margaret and Henry stepped out, eerily calm. "Officer," Margaret cooed, "thank goodness you're here. We were just checking a community access point this homeowner blocked." "This is private land," Officer Blake replied evenly. "And you were caught on camera trying to damage the lock." "This is HOA business," she insisted. "We have bylaws." "Bylaws don't override the law," he said. "Talk to your attorney before doing anything that could be trespassing." After they left, Officer Blake said, Keep your cameras on. Call us if they return. I thanked him and went inside, but sleep was impossible. If they were bold enough to bring bolt cutters, what else might they do? The next morning, my phone erupted with texts. Did you see the post? Are you blocking lake access? I opened the Pine Hollow community app. Margaret had posted, urgent, homeowner blocks historic lake access. Emergency meeting tonight, 7 p.m. All must attend. A photo of my gate accompanied it. Comments piled angry strangers calling me selfish, demanding the HOA punish me. I felt ill. This was retaliation. I called Daniel. They're turning the neighborhood against me. Take photos of everything, he said. Document that your property's up to code. We'll send a cease and desist letter today. I took the day off and VY cited the county clerk's office. When I explained, the clerk nodded knowingly. Pine Hollow HOA? You're not the first. They've tried claiming private lakefronts as community access for years. In 2018, they even pushed to alter zoning maps failed, but they never stopped. She handed me my deed, survey, and tax records. Your land extends to the water. No easements, no right-of-way. Relief washed over mesolid proof. At home, I photographed my yard and recorded a video showing the trail was mine. But when I returned from grocery shopping, I stopped short. My gate's lock was gone, replaced with an unfamiliar one. A note read, Community access restored. Contact HOA for your key. They'd done it again in daylight. I called the police. Officer Hayes arrived, examined the lock and note, and said, This is vandalism and trespassing. Want to press charges? Yes, I said firmly. And I want a restraining order. As he took photos, my elderly neighbor, Edith, approached. I saw them, she whispered. Margaret, Henry, and their usual handyman, with bolt cutters, around noon. I caught it on my birdwatching camera. Tears welled up. Edith, would you tell the officer? She nodded. I'm tired of their bullying. Last month, they fined me for my bird bath, called it an unapproved water feature. I've had it for 23 years. Her video and statement bolstered the case. Officer Hayes promised follow-up. Then my phone rang an unknown number. This is Henry Brooks, a cold voice said. You've made a mistake calling the cops. You destroyed my property, I replied. That's a crime, not an HOA issue. His tone darkened. Margaret knows people. Your boss golfs with her husband. Think about what matters more, your gate or your job. My hand shook as I blocked the number. I bought the toughest padlock I could find, replaced theirs, added 2 more cameras, and hung a laminated no trespassing sign. The next day, I thought they might back off with the EVY piling up documents, footage, police reports. I was wrong. At 7:45 a.m., while brushing my teeth, my phone buzzed with a mail's 5 new HOA violations. Hedges too tall, mailbox wrong color, unauthorized garden border, excessive water use, disruptive security setup. Each carried a due law 100 daily fine, due law 500 a day for things never previously flagged. It was blatant revenge. I emailed Daniel. They sent 5 violations this morning. It's insane. They're trying to intimidate you, he replied. Photograph everything. We'll add this to the cease and desist and request their violation history. If they're targeting you alone, it's harassment. I documented my trimmed hedges, regulation mailbox, simple stone border, and discrete cameras. This wasn't about rules, it was personal. By mid-morning, the community app overflowed with comments. Why block the lake? Selfish newcomer ruining everything. I didn't know most of these people. They painted me as the enemy, but I'd followed every rule. At noon, Edith knocked, holding cookies. I thought you could use some kindness, she said. Over tea, she shook her head. I've lived here 40 years. It was nice until Margaret took over 8 years ago. She's not supposed to serve that long 3-year limit, but she changed the bylaws. Most didn't fight it. What else has she done? I asked. She forced out 2 board members who questioned finances. One moved away. The other's roof permit was denied 6 times until she gave up. I've kept notes 5 years of meeting dates, votes, odd decisions in a binder. I stared, amazed. Edith, that's incredible. Would you let Daniel see it? She smiled. I hoped you'd ask. That evening, an HOA envelope awaited Maya special assessment notice. Due to my security concerns and disruption, they'd voted a due law 500 fee, due Friday. It wasn't a finite was punishment. I texted Daniel a photo. This is illegal, he said over the phone. Targeted assessments are discrimination. I'm filing a complaint with the county HOA office. Be careful, these people are desperate. He was right. At 6:30 a.m., Edith called, panicked. They're outside, Margaret, Henry, and others. I peeked out. 5 HOA members blocked my driveway. Margaret stood, arms crossed, foot tapping. I turned on my phone's recorder and stepped outside. Good morning, I said calmly. Why are you on my property? Drop the police report, Margaret demanded. What? You heard me, she snapped. The board agrees your actions are hostile. Keep this up, and we'll escalate. Escalate how? I asked, lifting my phone to show it recording. Henry adjusted his glasses. This is your chance to do right. That gate's community property, defying tradition. It's on my deed, I said. Threatening me here is harassment. A tall man with a clipboard, Leo, from landscaping, stepped forward. You're making enemies. Think about your future here. I have, I replied. Now move, I need to get to work. They parted slowly. I filed another police report, sent the recording to Officer Hayes and Daniel, and learned of an emergency HOA meeting that night. Neighbors texted. They say you owe due law $155,000 in fines. Edith called, shaken. They're barring you from attending, say you're not in good standing. What? I exclaimed. That's impossible. I've lived here a year. They're claiming 3 years of violations, she said. Margaret showed fake charts. I grabbed my document, surveys, photos, footage, and called Officer Hayes and Daniel. Meet me at the community center. This ends tonight. The parking lot was packed when I arrived. My heart pounded, but with Daniel and Officer Hayes beside me, I walked in. Silence fell. Over 50 people filled the room. Margaret, microphone in hand, stood before a projected image of my gate, red circles marking it. She glared at me. This is a private meeting, she announced. Homeowners in good standing only. Daniel stepped forward. My client's a homeowner with every right to be here. I'm her counsel, and Officer Hayes is investigating related crimes. Whispers spread. Margaret's smile tightened. We're addressing concerns over blocked lake access. This meeting violates your bylaws, Daniel interjected. 2 weeks' notice is required, not 2 days. Any vote tonight is invalid. Murmurs grew. Margaret gripped the mic. It's an emergency. Because I gated my own land months ago, I said, stepping up, or because you got caught breaking the law? Gasps rippled through. Daniel held up a survey. This proves the path is on my client's private property, no easement, no public access. A man stood. Margaret, you said it was donated 20 years ago. We've paid maintenance fees. There's no record of that, Daniel said. Officer Hayes added, we're investigating trespassing and damage to this homeowner's gate by board members. We have footage and fingerprints. A woman up front turned to Margaret. You said she vandalized community property. No, I said. They tried to bully me into surrendering my land, broken when I refused, and retaliated with lies and fines. Mark held up more papers. We have proof of targeted violations, fines issued only after she denied them a key. Margaret slammed her gavel. This is out of order. Then why are we here? Someone shouted. You've been lying. Edith spoke to a group, showing her notebook. A neighbor, Sam, approached me. They broke your lock? I showed him the video. They raised our dues for that trail, due law $50 extra yearly. That could be fraud, Daniel said. Margaret tried again. This is what outsiders do to our community. I'm not an outsider, I countered. I bought a home here, followed rules, and uncovered your board's deceit. Show us the records, voices demanded. Officer Hayes said, we'd like those to for our investigation. Margaret paled, adjourning the meeting, but it was too late. Neighbors swarmed me with questions, apologies, and stories of their own HOA woes. Edith handed me a note. HOA budget due law $5,000 for lake access last year. No work done. The fight was far from over, but I wasn't alone anymore. 2 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom, heart pounding. Margaret sat with her lawyer, her confidence gone. Daniel presented EVY Danke, the HOA's brochure claiming my path as a community perk, bank records linking due law $127,000 to Margaret's account via a fake company, and footage of her with bolt cutters. The judge charged her, Henry, and another board member with fraud and conspiracy. Outside, neighbors like Sam and Edith shared their own tales of HOA abuse. 6 months later, The scandal had unraveled a web of corruption, stolen funds, fake vendors, even ties to a councilman and developers. The new HO, led by Edith, refunded 60 fan tram of the misappropriated money and built a true community lake access. My gate stood firm, a symbol of a fight that reshaped Pine Hollow into a place of fairness and peace. Some battles start small, but standing your ground can open doors for something greater.